Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 21 going with today's Third Age Thursday, a time for us to revisit the familiar and not so familiar stories of the Third Age. Now, today we're going to go ahead and get back to Appendix A3 as we finally wrap up our readings on Durin's folk. Last time we ended with Gandalf agreeing to meet Thorin at his halls and his ominous comment about Smaug. And now it's time to start with a recap of the events of The Hobbit before we move on, wrapping up with one of the most moving moments, in my opinion at least, of the Legendarium. The story is told elsewhere of what came of that meeting, of the strange plan that Gandalf made for the help of Thorin, and how Thorin and his companions set out from the Shire on the quest of the Lonely Mountain that came to great ends unforeseen. Here only those things are recalled that directly concern Durin's folk. The dragon was slain by Bard of Esgaroth, but there was battle in Dale, for the orcs came down upon Erebor as soon as they heard of the return of the dwarves, and they were led by Bolg, son of that Azog, whom Dain slew in his youth. In that first battle of Dale, Thorin Oakenshield was mortally wounded, and he died and was laid in a tomb under the mountain with the Arkenstone upon his breast. There fell also Fili and Kili, his sister's sons, but Dain Ironfoot, his cousin, who came from the Iron Hills to his aid and was also his rightful heir, became then King Dain II, and the kingdom under the mountain was restored, even as Gandalf had desired. Dain proved a great and wise king, and the dwarves prospered and grew strong again in his day. In the late summer of that same year, 2941, Gandalf had at last prevailed upon Saruman and the White Council to attack Dol Guldur, and Sauron retreated and went to Mordor, there to be secure, as he thought, from all his enemies. So it was that when the war came at last, the main assault was turned southwards. Yet even so, with his far-stretched right hand, Sauron might have done great evil in the north, if King Dain and King Brand had not stood in his path, even as Gandalf said afterwards to Frodo and Gimli when they dwelt together for a time in Minas Tirith. Not long before, news had come to Gondor of events far away. "I grieved at the fall of Thorin," said Gandalf, "and now we hear that Dain has fallen, fighting in Dale again, even while we fought here. I should call that a heavy loss, if it was not a wonder, rather, that in his great age he could still wield his axe as mightily as they say that he did, standing over the body of King Brand before the gates of Erebor until the darkness fell. Yet things might have gone far otherwise, and far worse. When you think of the great battle of the Pelennor, do not forget the battles in Dale and the valor of Durin's folk. Think of what might have been, dragon fire and savage swords in Eriador, night in Rivendell. There might be no queen in Gondor. We might now hope to return from the victory here, only to ruin and ash. But that has been averted, because I met Thorin Oakenshield one evening on the edge of spring in Bree. A chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth." A chance meeting, indeed. Back to the text. Dis was the daughter of Thrain II. She is the only dwarf woman named in these histories. It was said by Gimli that there are few dwarf women, probably no more than a third of the whole people. They seldom walk abroad except at great need. They are in voice and appearance and in garb, if they must go on a journey, so like to the dwarf men that the eyes and ears of other peoples cannot tell them apart. This has given rise to the foolish opinion among men that there are no dwarf women, and that the dwarves grow out of stone. It is because of the fewness of women among them that the kind of the dwarves increases slowly, and is in peril when they have no secure dwellings. For dwarves take only one wife or husband each in their lives, and are jealous as in all matters of their rights. The number of dwarf men that marry is actually less than 1/3, for not all the women take husbands. Some desire none, some desire one that they cannot get, and so will have no other. As for the men, very many also do not desire marriage, being engrossed in their crafts. Gimli, Glóin's son, is renowned, for he was one of the 9 walkers that set out with the ring, and he remained in the company of King Elessar throughout the war. He was named Elf-Friend, because of the great love that grew between him and Legolas, son of King Thranduil, and because of his reverence for the Lady Galadriel. After the fall of Sauron, Gimli brought south a part of the dwarf folk of Erebor, and he became Lord of the Glittering Caves. He and his people did great works in Gondor and Rohan. For Minas Tirith they forged gates of mithril and steel to replace those broken by the Witch King. Legolas, his friend, also brought south elves out of Greenwood, and they dwelt in Ithilien, and it became once again the fairest country in all the Westlands. But when King Elessar gave up his life, Legolas followed at last the desire of his heart and sailed over sea. Here follows one of the last notes in the Red Book. We have heard tell that Legolas took Gimli Glowinsun with him because of their great friendship, greater than any that has been between elf and dwarf. If this is true, then it is strange indeed that a dwarf should be willing to leave Middle-earth for any love, or that the Eldar should receive him, or that the lords of the West should permit it. But it is said that Gimli went also out of desire to see again the beauty of Galadriel, and it may be that she, being mighty among the Eldar, obtained this grace for him. More cannot be said of this matter. Oh, there is so much here. I mean, first off, going back to the beginning of that, the death of Dan and King Bran, what a scene that must have been, right? And then what might have been? All those terrible things. Night in Rivendell, Arwen being slain on her way to Gondor, or not even being able to leave Rivendell, so no queen in Gondor. Ruin and ash, and all of this avoided because of a chance meeting. And I love that. Absolutely love that reference to a chance meeting, because we all know there is no chance in that sort of thing. This is very much doom or fate or the hand of Iluvatar, whatever you want to call it. The nature of dwarf women, the whole, springing out of the rocks thing. Gimli in his later life, the Lord of the Glittering Caves. I love the new gates forged for Minas Tirith. Obviously not all of solid mithril, but mithril and steel. These are going to be powerful doors for sure. The gates are not going to be broken down by any Witch King coming forward. And then that beautiful, beautiful ending, the thought of Legolas taking Gimli with him and Galadriel's grace and Gimli's desire to see her one more time. Because, of course, he's immortal. So getting to the Undying Lands doesn't mean he becomes immortal. I know that's probably a Mailbag Monday that I'm spoiling, but the short answer is mortals will die more quickly in the immortal, the Undying Lands, that will burn out like a moth in a flame. For now, though, that wraps it up for this week's Third Age Thursday. Come back next week as we move on to another set of readings. Maybe they'll be about dwarves too. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. And please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as I welcome another special guest for Fandom Friday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. If you're listening to this on a podcast, please follow or subscribe on your podcast apps. And all of you, please follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as one day I'll eventually do something with all of those when I have a little more time. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.